The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Welcome back to the Nova Society, the space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by our regular panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon. Together, we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines, the history, and the big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what the panel has for us today.
So today we have a question from Terry, who is writing to us from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Interesting. Chattanooga. I've always liked that, the sound of that word. And Terry writes, so Netanyahu is set to meet with President Trump sometime within the next few days. Reporting has them discussing Iran and the future of the West Bank. Israel is increasing its hold on the West Bank territory, while Iran seems firm in its stance on nuclear enrichment. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on both of these areas of conflict in the Middle East. Thank you, Terry. Mark, Scott, I have not been paying attention to this. It's just too much for me, too much going on.
Yeah.
So
the latest thing that Israel has done, which I would totally oppose also, and I think Trump has opposed it, and a bunch of Arab countries and the EU have all opposed it, is changing the rules of housing to allow Israelis or occupiers, settlers, to purchase lands and houses from Palestinians in the West Bank. And the idea there, I think, from the Israeli side is that if they're buying the lands, nobody should be able to say, that you're occupying the land. They're purchasing it legitimately. That is the new way that they're going to try to take over as much of the West Bank as they possibly can by moving settlers into land that they're buying rather than just occupying. The problem, of course, is that once you have the right to buy land from somebody, you have the incentive to harass them into selling it to you. And I don't know if the Israeli settlers are doing that yet, but if they haven't been, I think the fear is that they will, and they're going to continue to harass Palestinians in the West Bank to sell them their land, or face the kind of vandalism that we've seen in other places where these price taggers go out to raise the price tag for staying by destroying trucks and cars and things like that, doing vandalism to increase the cost for living there. And that kind of thing will, continue until the Palestinians sell their land to an Israeli family, sell their homes to an Israeli family, and this is the new way that they're going to try to get around the rules. And the Netanyahu people have allowed them to do this. It's not good for peace. It's not good for, I don't think it's good for Israel. It's a more misguided sort of right-wing Netanyahu stuff that his cabinet is pushing. And, I think everybody who needs to oppose it has come out and opposed it. And, Trump has opposed it. So, hopefully Netanyahu will listen to him. Yeah.
What makes Trump oppose this? Is it the idea that someone's paying for something that they should simply take?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean, I think that this is like, I think this goes against everything that's going on in Gaza, and that they need a stable population in the West Bank because that's where the peacekeepers are going to come from. Ultimately, they're gonna, Trump's dream of having a stable Gaza that he can build hotels on and things like that relies on a legitimate force to keep the peace in Gaza. And a large part of that force has to come from Palestinians who are in the West Bank. And the more agitated the West Bank is, the worse that situation gets in Gaza, and the further away they get from having peace in in Gaza. So I think that Trump's dream um, is depends on the ability of the Israelis and the Palestinians to get along, and there are factions in Israel, and they are currently in power in Israel that are against any of that. And that's simply the status quo right now. Whenever Israel gets around to elections, which seems to be, get put further and further off, there is some hope that some other government will be able to take over and oust Netanyahu and put him on trial and send him off to prison, along with all these other sort of right-wing lunatics who he's had to make this coalition with to form a government. So, yeah.
And this would also, excuse me, the current situation also calls into question Trump's claim of, oh, I've settled the war, and this is one of the 8 wars I've settled, and so on and so forth. So Netanyahu is rushing to Washington to do what exactly? What is he hoping to accomplish here,
Yeah,
in your view?
I have absolutely no idea. I know that he wants to continue to cultivate Trump as best he can, and to be the last person in the room when which will often is the determinant factor in Trump making policy. Um, and yeah, I don't know exactly. I'm sure that Netanyahu's going to Trump and saying we need to blow up Iran again. I'm sure he's going over there and saying there's not going to be any peace in Gaza. We need to. I mean, there's the 500 people have been killed in Gaza by the IDF since the ceasefire. Is possibly the worst ceasefire in history of the world. But whatever it is that Netanyahu wants, hopefully there are counterbalances in the Trump world that will help him resist it, and we can continue moving forward. We're supposed to be in phase 2 of the peace plan in Gaza. Well, I mean, the last of the hostages, a body was returned a couple of weeks ago, and that body returning was the last body that was an Israeli hostage, now dead in Gaza, and now supposedly we're in phase 2, but phase 2 is completely dependent on Hamas disarming, and they're saying we're not disarming, and so we're sort of stuck in this weird position of we're done with phase 1. Phase 2 we knew was not going to be easy. Phase 1 wasn't easy, but they're just making it so much harder. And I mean, I could go on a little bit if you want me to about what I think is going on in Gaza, but the question that we got is about the West Bank. And again, I think the two of them are clearly, obviously tied together. The forces of evil, I think, on both sides of the Israeli and the Gaza population, or Hamas, I mean, and their backers are doing everything that they can to stop peace from happening. Because once peace does happen, there's a certain amount of gelling that's going to go on, and that gelling is not necessarily what they themselves stand for. Again, an election would really go a long way, I think, to taking care of this, but they're not calling for elections yet, as far as I could tell.
How can Israel claim to want peace when it is flagrantly violating international law? Israel seems to treat the West Bank as a legitimate part of the state of Israel. This is still Terry. Now, I am not a supporter of Hamas, but isn't this sort of heavy-handed policy what made these groups rise to power possible? Scott always says Israel is a miracle. I would agree. So why can't they just be happy with what they have and leave the areas protected by international law alone? How might the issues in the West Bank affect the talks with Iran?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, how can they affect it? You were asking why Netanyahu's going to see Trump. I think he's actually going to go and talk to him about Israel or Iran. I think that's probably going to be the number one thing that he's gonna talk to Trump about. Let's remember, Netanyahu's going to be on that board of peace with his $1 billion. He'll get that information about, I think, Gaza and there. I don't think he needs to go to talk to Trump about it at the White House. I really do think he's talking about the issues with Iran. Iran is steadfast. Is steadfast in their position, and we'll get that in a little bit about enriching uranium. And Terry, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, international law says that the West Bank's supposed to be off limits. It has never been off limits. I mean, in a lot of ways, yeah, you can blame Israel for what they're doing. I legitimately blame them for what they're doing. But you can also legitimately blame whatever idiot thought that was going to be like, I don't know, some special barrier was going to be put there to keep everybody out. It was never going to happen. And that was just piss poor planning right from the beginning. And if we look at a lot of what's going on with Israel and with Gaza and with the West Bank and with a lot of things that are going on in the Middle East, it comes down to it was piss poor planning from the beginning. They could have done a lot better. Let's take Iraq for an instance. Why in the name of God would you create a country with two diametrically opposed religious sects in the same country? Why would you do that? I mean, what moron does that? I mean, if you ever watch A&E, Fear the Neighbor, which is, I think, absolutely the funniest thing, because some of these neighbors, I'm glad I don't live next to them. But the fact is that you don't do it. I mean, it's like crazy people living next to each other. But somebody sitting in a room and probably in London made the decision that, hey, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to separate it out like this. And, it looks something a little bit like maybe what an ancient map looked like from, I don't know, the 5th century BC. Oh, well, that must be fine. They didn't really, I mean, they never took into consideration the people that actually live in that area. And that's problem number one. Did Israelis' heavy-handed policy create the groups of Hamas? You can make the argument. You can make that argument, absolutely. Whenever you have, let's say, any kind of government, what created Antifa, which really isn't a group, it's just a movement. But what created Antifa? The idea of fascism. So there's always an answer to for everything that we have, for every political ideology that comes up, there's always an answer that's going to be brought out for it. And, is Hamas a great answer? Absolutely not. They're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. But once again, we go back to the origination of what created Gaza in the first place. Who thought that was a good idea? And so yeah, you can blame Israel a little bit for the today, but you got to go back a little bit and you got to say, okay, fine, who put this jigsaw puzzle together? It's really all their fault. Now, Scott has said Israel's a beautiful place, and it is. It is a beautiful place. My wife has family there. It is absolutely. But I will also say this. My brother-in-law and my niece are settlers in the West Bank. I don't know how to feel about that. I really don't. She went to the University of Haifa. Why isn't Israel proper good enough? I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I would never ask because, first of all, hey, that's their business. But I just don't get it. I mean, Haifa's a beautiful place. I mean, why not stay there? What's wrong with there? Um, so, yeah, in a lot of ways you could, Terry, say, why can't you just be happy with what you have? But I'll be honest with you. It's hard to be happy with what you've got when you're put into the worst neighborhood. I mean, it is hard. And they've got a hard road. Everybody around them wants to kill them. And whoever, devised this map had to know that. They had to know it. So a lot of this is just a product of piss. This is the total product of piss poor planning right from the beginning. Go ahead, bro.
From Terry, from my understanding, which is admittedly not tremendous, if you read Daniel Yergin, that's Yergin, Yergin, his book called The Prize, which is about oil, both King Ibn Saud, I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly, who founded Saudi Arabia, and former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, they both agreed that the state of Israel should not be placed where it is today, that would be a terrible, terrible mistake. And they both passed away. And the United Nations agreed that the state of Israel should be put where it is. But both the two leaders, King Ibn Saud and FDR, felt that if the state of Israel were placed where it is today, that would be a flashpoint for endless wars, endless conflict, endless friction, a constant state of the entire neighborhood wanting to kill the Israelis, and that would be a terrible idea. But it was the UN, and I was very shocked to learn that the UN was the one who made the decision to create the state of Israel. It was the British who created Iraq. I believe they also created Iran. They also created the situation in the African nation of Rwanda between the Hutu and the Tutsis by prioritizing the ethnic group that was lighter skinned and marginalizing the group that was darker skinned. Prior to that, neither of the two groups had any thought about lighter or darker. So the imperialist colonizing British did a tremendous damage in that area. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think we have to go back all that far really to think about what's going on. The way that the powers that be at the time divided up the Middle East without, as Mark said, without thinking about the people who actually live there and what their needs might be. I think at the end of World War II, there was this idea that people could simply move around and get where they wanted to be and where they were most welcome and most comfortable. And of course, that's never really fully worked out. But Mark asked a question before, why are these people in the settlers, in the settlements? And I think, I don't know if this is true of your family, but I have a really good friend from college who moved there. And what he has always said is that this is a religious imperative, and that the people who founded Israel, if you remember, were socialists and the kibbutzniks. Those people do exist there, but they're not in power. The people who are in power right now are religious right wingers, and what they see in the West Bank that they want is more control over Hebron. Hebron is the West Bank's largest city, but it's also a more significant city as far as the Jewish religion is concerned than Jerusalem is. As my friend Lenny would say, I don't care about Jerusalem. Give me Hebron and you can have Jerusalem back. You've got Rachel's tomb near Bethlehem, and you've got the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron. Those are the two areas that this law is specifically targeting for, very, very well backed Israeli settlers to go and start buying up land from Palestinians so that they can deepen their roots in the entire what had been, the original land of Israel, the two states, Samaria and Judah, and that's why they're, these religious people in the government now, which really didn't happen until, I don't know, the late 1970s, are now interested in the religious aspects of what we call the West Bank, and those are the reasons for those targets. Again, am not religious at all. I am of the firm belief that religion is not a force for good in the world. Any religion, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Hindu, all of it to me seems very antagonistic and harmful to individuals. But that's what's going on. I mean, they want Hebron, they want Bethlehem, they want these parts of Israel that were in the Bible, because they look at the Bible, they look at the 5 books of the Torah as not a history, but a cookbook for how you're going to be living more in God.
Yeah.
And to my friend Lenny, it's an imperative to him to kick out the Palestinians. It is a religious imperative. He says, look at what it says in the book of Exodus and in the other books. Throw them all out, kill them all, throw them all out, or you are going against God. And he used to say to me all the time, you care what the UN thinks? I'm talking about what God thinks. And I'm like, hey, look, I'm not a believer myself. And I just can't get behind, this particular aspect of what you're doing. And it's not going to work. Now, he'll point out that in every Arab country in the world, there were significant Jewish populations that in the 1940s, late 1940s through the 50s and into the 60s, left those Arab countries and moved to Israel. And I think the expectation was that the Christian Palestinians, if they could make peace with the Israelis, could stay. The Muslim Palestinians, if they could make peace with Israel, could stay. But anybody who opposed them had to leave. That this was going to be a Jewish state, and it was not going to include just the coastal plain and the bit of Negev desert, and that it was going to be the entire region. And believe me, at one time this map was included all of Jordan, what is today Jordan, as part of, and a good part of Iraq as being Israel, the ancient land of Israel. Again, whether that's significant to you or not, I suppose depends on your view of religion. I myself, I'm a believer in the two-state solution. I'm a believer that the Palestinians can have a land of their own. It may not be contiguous lands. It may be like a big chunk of the West Bank and all of Gaza, and they'll have to live with that part of it. They probably could have had more if they had made peace in 1922 or 1936, 1948, so on and so forth. But they didn't. They chose war instead. They lost every war. They're going to continue to lose every war, and they have to deal with the consequences of losing those wars and not choosing peace. The Israelis were not happy with what they got. They weren't happy with their with the partition as made by the UN, but they accepted it. And the Palestinians probably should have done the same thing. And one theme that runs through Palestinian history has been their leadership has been awful. Whether it's Yasser Arafat or it's George Habash or it's the current leadership in Gaza or it's Abu Abbas in the West Bank, their leadership has been terrible, and they have not been pragmatic, and they have not been sensible at all about their leaders, about what they should do. But this is what they should do. I mean, the world is going to condemn this move on the part of the Israelis, and I condemn it too.
Mhm.
I do, I love America, I love Israel. I do not like the governments of either one right now. I oppose our government and I oppose Israel's government, and both of these governments need to be voted out, or if they're going to remain in there, learn how to play by the rules as best we can to create checks and balances on them. Now, the parliamentary system doesn't in Israel means that the Knesset is controlled by the executive branch, and the only opposition they have is the judiciary branch. But the judiciary needs to come in and say, no, you cannot do this in the West Bank, and to the extent that they have any kind of jurisdiction over the West Bank, because it is not currently a part of Israel. But they've got to be able to put a check on the government saying you can change the rules to allow Israel to decide on matters of purchasing real estate instead of the local authorities in the West Bank.
Yeah, and if you really want to, and again, I'm a great studier of history. When after World War II, they tried to divide it out into separate countries, and I'm not advocating for a one-state solution, but we can take a little bit of a lesson from history during the Ottoman Empire, which this was all part of. The Ottoman Empire had the millet system, and the millet system granted sort of non-Muslim communities such as Jews, Greek Orthodox Christians, American Christians, whatever, a bit of autonomy. They were subordinate to Muslims, yes, but they had all rights and they were protected by the Ottoman government. As a matter of fact, in the late or in the mid 19th century, that was actually changed. Jews were actually given full citizenship status in the Ottoman Empire. So it all seems that when we start, so at that point in time with the millet system, the Jews that were part of the Ottoman Empire had access to all the things they wanted. They had access to Jerusalem. They had access to all of these places. So yeah, I mean, there was really nothing to complain about other than the fact that it was kind of a caste system in a way, but no different than the caste system is even in a democracy like the United States. If we don't think we don't have a caste system, you got another thing coming. You got the haves and you got the have-nots. We just don't recognize it as that. So, if you say, well, I've got all the rights that a rich person has, really go to court and see how many rights you got compared to the rich person. You explain it to me then. But the fact is that once we started separating everybody out and saying, okay, that's your area over there and you stay there, and that's your area over there and you stay there, now we begin to get the problems. And although, the Ottoman Empire was around for an awful long time, and there was a lot of shifts and all this stuff into it, but the fact is that even though they were predominantly a Muslim government, they were willing to give. It wasn't this kill all the infidels kind of thing. That's only when the Crusaders decided that we were going to come down and us Catholics decided we were going to cause trouble. It wasn't like that. So they were extremely tolerant. And Scott brings up about the Torah. Yeah, religion's great at saying kill everybody else. Kick them out and kill everybody else. I mean, in my faith, the Roman Catholic faith, just go back to the Spanish Inquisition. I mean, you want to see horrible? We made the Muslims and we made the Jews look like amateurs when it came to condemning people. Look at the Salem witch trials, for God's sakes. Look at all these things, and that's the Catholics. That's strictly well, maybe not the Salem witch trials. That was probably more the Protestants, but it was Christianity. So, but whenever we start to divide people out and say you go over there and you go over there, somebody's going to have something they want. And I think this goes to your question, Terry. Why don't they stay in their own backyard where they should be happy? Because you never can put all the stuff you want into that area. And it's always you're going to look to it. And as Scott has pointed out, I look to that cave. I look to this. Well, the international law says I can't go there. And as Lenny says, I don't care what international law says. God's law says I have to go there. So, it creates, when you get social political ideology that is not understanding of religious ideology, because I'm going to guarantee you, nobody in that United Nations, when this was finally done, nobody in Britain, nobody anywhere, maybe Roosevelt did have an idea. None of them said, gee, there's this cave over there. We really ought to include that in Israel because that'll make them happy. But even if they did, well, maybe they still wouldn't be happy. Look at us in Greenland. I mean, we want Greenland, for Christ's sakes. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing that we look back that we actually did this better in ancient times than we can do it today. And I think that's a lesson that we can take. And I am all for, like Scott, I am all for a two-state solution because right now that's all we got left. Unless when somebody comes in and says, you know what, let's just get rid of all those doggone countries. Let's make it the Ottoman Empire again. Let's put the Ottomans in charge again. And let's go back to the millet system. So everybody seems fine with it. And everybody was kind of fine with it at the time. And let's just go back to that. But then again, when you had the Ottoman Empire, they weren't so good either. So, it is what it is.
So I'm glad you said that because I was just about to go.
Well, and if you want to know how bad the Ottoman Empire was, watch Dracula because that's who he was fighting in Transylvania. I mean, yeah, they weren't the greatest guys. I mean, you can go through, all the wars that the conquest wars that they had and this, that, and the other. But I'm talking about the Ottoman Empire, not of the 10th century. I'm talking the Ottoman Empire of the 19th century, which still wasn't all that great. But,
we just passed the anniversary of the Armenian Holocaust, right?
Right. But you're not going to have a perfect situation. But what I'm saying is that it's the system that they have, that millet system, which in a lot of ways may be exactly what Israelis are trying to do with Palestinians. It's kind of a millet system. Yes, you're going to be protected, but you're not really a full citizen. Yeah. I don't know if that's the way they go with it, but that is called the millet system. And again, there's the United States would never admit that we have that here. We'd never admit that because part of it is you pay extra taxes too. So, whatever. But when you think about it, yeah, we pay extra taxes too compared to the people that can, hire the lawyers and get out of it. So, you kind of look at it and say, maybe that's not such a crazy ass idea as it might seem on the surface. I don't know. I see Scott's giving me the look.
Well, I mean, I think the Jewish people are never going to accept ever again existing at the kindness of other people, and that's what anti-Zionists basically want, and that's why I remain a Zionist because I don't think that any people in the world should exist only at the pleasure of some other people. And that's the way it was. I mean, the Ottoman Empire was wildly uneven in their treatment of other people, including Jews, but also including Christians, as we saw in the Armenian situation. and that, most of the time everybody got along just fine, but if there was one problem, all of a sudden they're treating everybody as dhimmi and not full citizens or not even human beings at times, depending on how harsh things went. The same thing happened in the Pale of Settlement. The same thing happened in Europe. And the only solution for that was Israel, a place where the Jewish religion has the power that it needs to survive on its own without depending on the kindness of strangers. And that's what Israel represents to me. Very happy here in America. I have no plans to move to Israel, but I like going to Israel, and I like, I find the place very vibrant and very interesting. But look, the situation right now really depends on Hamas disarming, a two-state of an eventual, movement toward a two-state solution that would be backed by the whole world, right? Including the Arab world, including the Israel, including all our allies, including the EU, including the United States, etc. And that Iran, for all of its ambition, to be the power in the Middle East, that needs to be opposed. And Hamas was a part of the Iranian army proxy abroad, as was Hezbollah and others. It's really important for the Palestinians in the West Bank to be treated well as people on their way to having their own country in their own land, and that they participate in the disarming of Gaza and the rebuilding of Gaza, the reconstruction of Gaza. It is so important to do that. And I go back to that speech in 2023 in the September, where Bibi Netanyahu announced the grand plan with Saudi Arabia, and 2 weeks later, Hamas attacked, as being a side road, a detour from what should have been happening, and what can still happen. More complicated now in a lot of ways, a little less complicated in that Iran is no longer a power capable of funding proxies. Can't really, almost defenseless right now. There are warships, obviously, from the United States in the Persian Gulf that are ready to attack Iran at any moment, and that the stability in this entire region depends, believe it or not, on this tiny little strip of land called Gaza, and that we need Palestinian cooperation in Gaza in order to create conditions of peace. It's a very, very complicated thing. I don't think we have time to go through the whole thing, but just suffice it to say that Hamas is not the IRA, right? Hamas is not looking to oust the Israelis from Gaza or the West Bank. That was never their goal. Hamas's goal is to wipe Israel off the map altogether. And obviously the Israelis are never going to permit that to happen. And so that's the tension that we're in right now. And we need to take the necessary steps to get into this phase 2. But the next part of phase 2 that has to occur is the disarmament of Hamas. And I do believe that we need a lot of different forces to do that, including Arab countries and Muslim countries, some of which have volunteered already to go in there and be a peacekeeping force, right? But let's face it, there was a peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon, and all they did was stand by while Hezbollah became the power in Lebanon, dug tunnels, rearmed, and prepared to fight a war against Israel. Israel cannot allow that to happen again. So the peacekeeping force that's in Gaza has got to be one that has a lot more sympathy towards Israel than the UN force that was in southern Lebanon did. And again, a large part of this seems to depend on the one word that has no meaning in international relations, and that is trust. Trust is a meaningless concept when it comes to international relations, as Ronald Reagan used to say all the time. Trust but verify. Really, you don't even need the trust there. All you really need is the verification. You need to verify that things are going the way you're hoping they go, and that the steps are being taken, and nobody is covering up what's going on underground there the way that they have in the past.
Yeah.
In order to do that, it's going to be Palestinians fighting Palestinians, which is going to be ugly. And the only way that the Palestinians are going to be able to justify doing that is if Israel can behave itself in the West Bank, and Israel has no intention right now. This government has no intention of behaving itself in the West Bank.
I agree. All right.
Yeah. So the third part of Terry's question is Terry continues saying talks continue between Iran and the U.S. Iran has brutally put down protests, even as Trump threatens military action, sanctions, and his favorite, tariffs. Israel is pressing Iran to have no nuclear enrichment. The U.S. wants Iran to stop supporting terrorist groups and is deploying more military assets to the region. So I guess I'm asking, what's the point? With the clear divisions between the sides, I cannot see a possible resolution. And why aren't we calling out what is really the cause of all this? Trump's leaving the original Iranian nuclear deal.
No, I certainly agree with that. I mean, that deal was a very, very targeted deal that didn't cover as much of the area as idealists, I guess, would want it to. But it was a good deal that the Iranians were complying with, and we never should have left. And the reason that we left was because the last person in the room when Trump was making that decision happened to be either Netanyahu or Sheldon Adelson, who is pro-Israel gazillionaire, with a lot of casinos all over the world, and his wife, who I believe was Israeli born, actually continues to be a force in the White House, which is a house divided in a large way about what the future of the Middle East and the world should look like. So, talking is better than fighting. So as long as they keep talking, that's good. Iran is going to have to give up its any hope that it ever has of nuclearization and weaponization. Trump has assured us that that's already happened. Apparently, that wasn't shockingly the case, because he continues to talk about it, even though we wiped them out in, what was it, June of last year. Apparently they're not as wiped out as we were led to believe, and that they're going to continue. They're going to continue to try to have that leverage that they feel they need. Trump also had an opportunity to support the insurrectionists in Iran, did not take that opportunity. Also, I should point out, had the Israelis apparently told Trump that they had the Ayatollah in their sights and could have taken him out, I certainly would have advocated for that. That's one person dying, as opposed to 30,000 or whatever it is who've died in Iran since that time. But he didn't take that opportunity, unfortunately, and here we are. So, look, I mean, in a region where mistakes are made, like, on top of other mistakes, and they continue to be mistakes made on mistakes, and nobody is immune to this. Obama made huge mistakes. Bush obviously made huge mistakes. I'm sure Biden made mistakes. Trump seems to almost make nothing but mistakes. There is, believe it or not, there is still hope that this can turn out to move in the correct direction, in the direction of peace, but it becomes more and more complicated.
Wow, and you say I'm the optimist. It's yeah, there's an opportunity here, and you're right, Terry. We got to go back to the original. If we had stayed in that deal, was it a great deal? No, it wasn't a great deal, but it was better than what we got right now. And sometimes you got to look at it, you got to say, you only can get the best you can get. You're not going to get perfect. Yeah, everybody wants something different, and I think the thing that a lot of people don't see, especially if they see it from their own perspective, they see it as a very one-faceted problem here. And the fact is that everybody's got an interest. And it's not only the U.S. wanting the Iran to stop terrorist group. It's not only Israel, wanting, that the enrichment goes away. It's not only that Iran wants to continue to be able to enrich uranium, probably not weapons grade. There's other actors in here too. There are other actors. There are the Saudis are involved into this. I mean, every single person in the region, every single country in the region has their own agenda of what they want to see. In a lot of cases, we forget that. In fact, if you watch the news, all they talk about is what Israel wants, what Iran wants, and what the U.S. wants. They're forgetting what the Saudis want. They're not thinking about what the Jordanians want, but they probably want something too, guaranteed. They're not thinking what the Kurds want. I'm sure the Kurds want something. You could go through a whole list of all the people in this area, and then let's add in what the Chinese want and what the Russians want. And if you think you're going to solve what all of those different entities want in one type of solution, you're out of your bloody mind. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But I think so many times we forget how many players there are in the Middle East and how many different agendas we are truly dealing with. Because as I say, here in the United States, we hear about what we want and Israel wants. And, and we're in opposition to whatever Iran wants. But there's the Russians, there's the Chinese, all these other actors that are involved into it, that are involved in this region in some way or another. Why? Because there's oil there. Number one, that's why. It becomes so much more complex. And again, I totally agree. Trump leaving the original Iran nuclear deal was a bad move, because for as lacking it was, it was better than nothing. And sometimes you got to start the journey with the first step. And maybe this was the first step. And Trump just basically, in my mind, came in there and got rid of it because somebody else did it. Had nothing to do with how good it was. Had nothing to do with any of the rest. This was somebody else's deal. I can do a better deal. Well, what type of deal has he done? None.
None.
He hadn't done any. No deal. I can stop the war in 24 hours between Ukraine and Russia. One phone call. Yeah, how'd that work out for you? I mean, the fact is that these are complex, and we might be able to come up with agreement between Israel and Iran. Maybe, I don't know. But there's going to be somebody out there that's not going to be happy with it, that is also an actor in that area. And unless you deal with all of the actors in the area and all of the people with the different agendas, you're never going to have a true solution, because somebody's going to stir up shit just to stir it up, because the conflict is better in their mind than a peace that kind of cuts them out. And that's something we got to remember.
And
yeah, sorry. Can I just say one thing? John Kerry, it took him 5 years to negotiate agreement that Trump just dropped. All right, these agreements take a long time and a great deal of patience, which Trump apparently doesn't have. He has no patience for anything. And that is not, everyone says, oh, he's such a great negotiator. No, He's not. Negotiations take a great deal of time, a great deal of patience.
Actually,
And
just
they
to put
go
to put
ahead,
a
please.
fine tip on it, he calls himself a great deal maker, not a great negotiator. His deal making tends to be very broad strokes and without a lot of detail. And then it's up to other people to go and do the negotiating. So I just want to be clear about that because when he comes back and says, "I made a deal. This is the greatest deal ever. This is the greatest deal." There's never any negotiation that made the deal. It's just somebody has said to him, "All right, you know what? We could probably work that way," and he declares victory and walks away. And that's what he considers his job. Everybody else is expected to go out there and negotiate the actual nitty-gritty part of it, which he can't be bothered with.
Which is exactly what you would expect out of somebody that was in real estate. He goes in, he says, "Okay, we got a deal. You're going to sell me this piece of property." That's done. His part's done. Now let the lawyers sort it out. I mean, and that's basically the way he's treating our international relations. But the bad news is that's not the way international relations work. You moron. That is not the way it works. And it boggles my mind. He's got this Witkoff guy. I mean, what the heck? Unfortunately, we don't even know what's going on when in those talks with Witkoff. We're not privy to those. We don't know how bad we really look. Or maybe we look good. I don't know. But those are things that they're not going to tell.
Sorry, we don't even have our own Russian-speaking translators. We're using when Witkoff speaks with the Russians, we're using their translators.
There you go. Great work.
I mean, that
stupid
to me. Oh my God, absolutely. And people are giving Trump false information. Later on, there's a question, so I won't go into it now, but it's you're right. He calls himself a deal maker, but he's not.
No.
He's simply not. It's horrific what's happening. So thank you, Terry, for your wonderful, wonderful questions. We appreciate it.
And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Sciences, the JICS. This open access journal, double peer-reviewed, provides a platform for emerging scholars to publish their work and engage in meaningful dialogue across disciplines. The JICS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis and is published through the NovaWorks Scholarly Repository at Nova Southeastern University. You'll find a link to the journal in our episode description.